Welcome to the Communication Workshop. I'm AgWeek. I'm the NDSU Extension Soil Health Specialist. So I work primarily with farmers, with other educators, including our county agents and our CS organizations, anyone that brings information out to people that are going to put it on the ground. So that's my role at NDSU.
My name is Tim Hamrich. I work in communications consulting. I have been hosting the Soil Sense podcast along with Abby for the last over a year now, almost 2 years going on for that podcast, and I've been in communications for several years.
We'll go to the panel now, which is about radio, television, written media. And I'm excited for this one. Tim, you're going to moderate this session, so you might as well turn it over to you.
Yeah, great. And we'll try to get to your questions for the social media during lunchtime. I'll try to get into the chat and see if I can answer some questions there. But yeah, I think the social media session dovetails nicely into radio, television, and written media, because I know we had questions going into this about, well, how do I become the person that they reach out to, right, for radio, television, and written media? And one way is being active in the conversation on social media. So we're really, really lucky to have people who are doing this every day when it comes to radio, TV, and magazines. In Mick, Kjar, Trevor, Peterson, and Bill Spiegel. Thank you all three for being here. And we're going to start off with just some brief intros. If we could, maybe just 30 seconds on an intro. And Mick, we'll go ahead and start with your radio voice.
Okay, thank you very much. Just segueing a little bit back to the social media segment. I do have a LinkedIn account, but I don't check it at all because I'm looking at this point in my career looking for less work and not more work. So,
but here you are anyway.
Yes, on video. Now I was for about 30 years. I was on Channel 11, Channel 4 in Fargo, 1988 through 2015, and. In about 2015, I decided I need to quit getting up at 2:30 in the morning and working 16 hours a day. So now I have a radio show called Farm Talk, and I'm the farm director for Ag News 890 in Fargo, and Farm Talk has about 8 or 9 radio stations across North Dakota, South Dakota, and adjacent areas of western Minnesota. The Ag Central Radio Network has 22 stations, and it's owned by a group called I3G Radio. And that group owns and operates a number of stations in eastern North Dakota and around the upper Midwest. So I get to talk farming and agriculture every day on the radio.
Looking forward to hearing a lot more about that, Mick. And Trevor, let's get an introduction from you.
All right. Well, I'm Trevor Peterson. I've been in TV media for about 20 years now. I was with the NBC affiliate down in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for 4 years. And then I was with the ABC affiliate in Fargo, North Dakota for about 13 years, doing TV, sports, a little bit of everything, behind the camera, in front of the camera, writing, producing, all that kind of thing. And then about 6 years ago, I went over to the Forum, and they started a show called AgWeek TV. And so I've been kind of a videographer, editor, producer for that show, and we're in our 6th season now. AgWeek TV is shown throughout the upper Midwest, 5 or 6 states, along with Canada as well, on a weekly basis. It's a half-hour show, and half-hour agriculture show. We cover everything from kind of hard news to features and lifestyle stuff as well. So
great. And Bill.
Yes, hi, I'm Bill Spiegel. I am a crops editor at Successful Farming magazine. I'm based in North Central Kansas. I'm a part-time writer for Successful Farming, and then I also farm the rest of the time too on our 4th generation family farm that uses a host of soil health practices. So I've been in the industry for about 25 years, worked for a couple different publications, but Successful Farming is where I'm at now.
Okay, well, really lucky to have all three of you guys on here. This is something, it's a rare treat to get this, this level of media and just to get to pick their brains about how we can get our messages out there better. And maybe a good place to start is with you, Mick. I know you are coming up with new, fresh content every single day. So, where do you go to find this content, and how can those tuning in get on the radar of someone like yourself?
Well, segueing back to social media, I have a Twitter account, and I do follow a lot of people who are farmers. Love ag Twitter, and they bitch and they brag, so I get a lot of either sources of people on Twitter, or I get an idea for where to go, and then I'll find a specialist in that area who would like to be on the radio. Your very first panel was this morning was talking about doing presentations and being in front of a group. I think for a lot of people, being something even more scarier than giving a speech and standing in front of a group of people is being on the radio or being on television. I remember the first time I went on TV back in the mid 80s, where Trevor used to work over at WDAY television. The lights came on and my IQ instantly dropped about 100 points. The brighter the light, the brightness of the lights is inversely proportional to the IQ of the person that's on the camera. So I know either being interviewed on camera, when that red light comes on, you're real scary, or suddenly when you get on the radio, oh man, you forgot what you're going to talk about. So what I tell everybody and have for, well, I've been doing this now for 47 years. The best ad libs are well rehearsed. So write everything down and get at. But like you said, Tim, I'm coming up with 2 hours of content every day, and thankfully it's not a full 2 hours. But I need 8 people to talk to every single day, and I got to find them and come up with a topic. And so I know that I feel like sometimes the extension agents that I call, they're answering the phone, oh, geez, it's Mick again, doggone it. But so I appreciate the fact that people are willing to be on the radio and willing to talk about, hey, how the harvest went, what's going on ag-wise, any problem, to promote a meeting. I am looking all the time for people to be on the radio and just talk about agriculture, talk about farming. That's the name of the show. So the easiest way, maybe to find my email is Mick, M-I-C-K, @kqlx.com. If you have an issue that you want to get on the radio, and if it's farming related, or follow me on Twitter, Mick Kjar, M-I-C-K-K-J-A-R, at AG890. So that's how to find me, and I take all comers.
Wonderful. And I know, Bill, for you, writing for a magazine, you probably are reaching out to sources with a story sort of in mind. And so for you, how should people try to get on your radar, and how can they position themselves and so that you might think of them when you're trying to write that story?
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of the stories that I try to come up with are essentially, they come from meetings like what Abby has at NDSU, like the Dirt Workshop the next couple of days. And while the science and the research is important, I think it's really important also to have another face to the element, a farmer, for example. That's where the hook of the story is. So to find folks who are credible is not always an easy thing to do. I mean, a lot of people like to they like the publicity. They might have an agenda that they want to pursue. So I think it's up to a journalist's filter, I guess, to find people who will be good, credible sources. And I think those are kind of few, and they're becoming fewer and fewer, because some people, when they do get the publicity of being on the radio or on TV or in a magazine, sometimes the neighbors don't like that, and they can make life difficult. So anyway, that's kind of going off on a different bit of a tangent. I'm just basically seeking for people who are sincere, who have integrity, and honest, and are willing to admit that, hey, I don't have every answer. We've made some mistakes too, because I really think that's where the learning occurs. So it's kind of a vetting process, an internal vetting process in me, or in my mind, and in most journalists' mind, and that's it's taken a few years to get to that point.
So I know, Bill, sometimes I've emailed you or contacted you because I work with a farmer who's a cooperating farmer on a research project, and I think what they're doing is really spectacular. And I'll email you the name of that farmer, or say, here's a story that I think is interesting from an extension perspective. And so in some cases, you'll end up highlighting that farmer, but then also I get a little bit of the benefit because I get quoted in the article as the extension person to bring in some of the science. And that seems to work pretty well. If people find stories that they could just email those stories to you or contact you in some way to bring that information to you or any other writer, really.
Yeah, absolutely, Abby. I think one of the most important things for us as journalists is to find good sources who can provide good sources, and extension is one of the best ways that I find a real credible source.
Yeah, I think the other important thing there is, you're presenting a story and not just a person. A lot of times on the podcast, people will say, "Well, here, you need to talk to this person." Okay, well, why do you think I need to talk to that person? Just trying to understand, like, what's the story here? And so thinking about not just I have this research, I did this thing, more just like, what's the story here, and why is this engaging and interesting to others? And Trevor, I want to bring you in here. Mick mentioned when the lights go up, our IQs drop, and I definitely have had that experience. What advice can we give people once they're on, either on a radio show or on in your case TV? What advice can we give them so that they present themselves in the best light?
I always try to kind of let people know, just to have a conversation. When we're visiting, I kind of try to let the people know, get the equipment, get the camera set up, whatever, and kind of do it in a way where the reporter, if I'm out with a reporter, they can kind of just visit with that person and kind of get them to relax, get their guard down a little bit, get them to not think about the camera so much. Or sometimes if I'm by myself and I'm the reporter and the photographer as well, just kind of make some small talk, and let them know, hey, this is not a big deal. I want you and I just to have a great conversation. I think that's the most important thing. The best interviews are just let's just have a great conversation, whether something similar to like where, you and I would just visit about over lunch. I mean, it shouldn't be any different. You shouldn't be any different than, in that way and stuff. So I try to kind of just get the people to relax a little bit, make them some small talk. And sometimes if I'm the reporter or if I'm the photographer and there's a reporter there, sometimes I'll start rolling even as the reporter's talking. And they don't even really know that person you're interviewing doesn't even really know sometimes that you're rolling. Sometimes it makes them nervous if you say, they've small talked and then you say, okay, we're ready now. Go ahead. I'm rolling, whatever. Then it's like, then they kind of take the deep breath or whatever like that. So if you can just do it in a very casual, relaxed way, hey, this is nothing big. We're just going to talk about what you know. You called us or you know about this subject. You're the expert. Tell us what you know. Tell us why it's important. Like you said, Tim, why should people know about this? And just be yourself. I think that's the biggest thing.
Great. And Mick, let's bring you here on the same point about you're interviewing people on the live radio, and that's nerve-wracking for a lot of people. Any advice that you would like to give all of your future guests on your radio show so that they present themselves in the best light?
Well, I tell everybody being on the radio with me is like being out on a township road leaning on a fender. And that's really how I try to do it. Although somebody once said, well, that means we broke down. Do we have a 12-pack to open up? But so it really should be casual. People tune into the radio or television. Well, I guess there is a difference between radio and television. TV, they want, a nice looking host who's talking about, something that they're an expert on or have a strong opinion on. But on the radio, it's just two people having a conversation. And that's why when I start, I'll usually ask about the weather, how hey, did you you mentioned last time we visited, you were trying to get your house painted and the weather wasn't cooperating. Did you get your house painted? Some personal things that establish, and I'll ask this, and I kind of get the sense sometimes that people on the other end are uncomfortable about me asking a personal question. But I do want to establish the fact that, hey, here's two people who are just talking on the radio, and that's all there is to it. So I like to establish the fact that, okay, it's a personal conversation between two people. But then I don't want to go cover a lot of territory quickly. Shallowly. I do want to get vertical and go deep into a subject, and I'll ask a lot of follow-up questions. And oftentimes I won't cover all of the, my guests, my interviews are I don't use 10-second TV sound bites. My guests have to stay on the radio for 8 or 10 minutes, and sometimes that's a long time. So I will cut it short, but I do want to get personal and then get vertical, get deep into a topic.
Absolutely. Well, we have a question in the chat that actually segues nicely into the next point, and this one's going to be for Bill. Bill, what's the best way to get in front of media? Historically, press releases have kind of been the way. Are those still relevant, or do you just get bombarded with so many of those that it becomes white noise at this point?
Yeah, we do get a lot of press releases, and that's fine. That's a great way to attract a potential journalist, and I still encourage that, and I still use them. It is something that you kind of have to sift through and see whether the objective of that press release is something that we as successful farming might want to follow through. That's going to be different than a weekly newspaper, or daily newspaper, or something like that, or weekly farm publication. But I think just really the crux of any way to get a hold of a journalist is either press release or direct phone call. And the most important part is why. Why is my subject that I want you to cover, why is that going to be important? For Successful Farming Magazine, it's got to make a farmer money or make a farmer more efficient. Maybe in a weekly newspaper or something, the objective is just it's local news. But I think knowing what the audience that you're trying to reach, as someone who wants coverage, and trying to make sure that the journalist knows that reason is absolutely vital, because we are getting bombarded with a lot of opportunities of stories to cover.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is, at least for Successful Farming, the press releases that come in that clearly demonstrate how it's going to make farmers money or make them more efficient are the ones that are going to kind of make their way to the top of the stack. Is that right?
That is the case for me. Now, I have coworkers that might have other objectives, but since I farm myself, I'm pretty selfish. If it can't help me or any other farmer, I'm really not that interested. I think farmers' time and energy is very precious. So we've got to make sure that we're going to write a story that's going to make them money or make them more efficient.
Great. Well, Trevor, what about for you? I mean, do you all look at press releases for stories for AgWeek, or how do you decide what stories to tell there?
About and just stopping by the elevator, or stopping by and visiting a farmer, and it's amazing what as you just kind of visit with people, you'll come up with things, or they'll tell you, hey, do you have you heard about this, or this might be something willing to you should check out or whatever. So all those options I think are good. As some of the other guys have said, you got to sometimes you got to weigh the motives. Some people, they'll tell you about something, hey, you should check this out or whatever. And then we'll contact them and oh, I don't want to talk, I don't want to talk about that, well, then it's kind of like, okay, then, this is a story you wanted out, but you're not really helping us. You're not giving us any other ideas, whatever. And so it's like, if you want this story and you feel strongly about it, whatever side of it you're on, so that's something always you kind of consider. You got to kind of like Mick said, I think you got to vet a little bit sometimes, or Bill, you got to vet a little bit and see where they're coming from, why they want it. But I think, nowadays it's easy to get in touch with media people, and, whether it's social media, email, phone call, whatever the case may be. And we appreciate all that. And sometimes there's a good story there, and sometimes there's not. But if you don't reach out, you'll never know. I mean, I always tell people, what's the worst? If you send out a press release or you send out something, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, nobody maybe calls you back because maybe we've looked at it. We say, that's maybe not as interesting for a large amount of people, or for our publication, or for our media as it might be. But, you don't know that unless you send something out.
Great. Got another question from the chat here. This one is for Mick specifically. A lot of people are starting their own podcasts, so wondering about your advice for good quality content when it comes to audio for their podcast.
Oh, good quality audio. Well, bring the microphone real close here, which is what I'm trying to do. A lot of times the laptop microphone just doesn't cut it. And so good quality audio. I've seen podcasts or some of the video casts that people do where the microphone's on the other side of the room. So good quality audio. Cameras, cell phone cameras are really good nowadays for doing that. So if you can hook up a or these new Apple earbuds I see Trevor's using, those are very good for having good quality audio, but just a good clean sound that is easy to listen to. It doesn't have a lot of room noise. That would be my main suggestion. There are a couple of, again, if you Google on the internet, just get a good microphone. It doesn't have to be a high quality, Electro Voice RE20 or anything like that. Just get a good quality microphone. You can't go to Radio Shack anymore, but you can order one online and just get a good microphone and a good and your cell phone camera will do a good job of recording video. And then there are a lot of good cell phone, or rather, there are a lot of good online free software for editing video. But I think the question mainly was audio. So there is also an argument these days that podcasts are so last century. So I don't know. There's another topic of discussion. Are podcasts relevant anymore? I know a lot of people are doing podcasts, but man, they get to be real long sometimes. So that would be my other suggestion is make sure that you are brief and to the point and don't waste people's time.
Well, one follow-up on that, are mics with cords better, corded mics better? I assume they mean as opposed to just using maybe Bluetooth instead, or perhaps just a computer mic. Do you like to see people with corded mics, Mick?
Well, sometimes the headset mic sounds a little thin and tinny, but a corded mic versus a wireless mic, Bluetooth mics are all, and sometimes when I have people on the radio, when they're on their holding the phone up to their and talking like they're on the phone, actually sounds better than a Bluetooth speaker. And also sometimes I'm talking to like a scientist who's got spreadsheets spread out over their whole desk or a conference room table, and they think they sound real good on a speakerphone. They don't. So the closer you can get to the actual microphone, the better you're going to sound. But I think Bluetooth, wireless, they're all pretty similar right now.
Okay, great. A lot of audio questions coming through. I see we got one more on software for podcasting. I can tell you kind of what we've looked at and what we use for recording. We either use a program called Squadcast, which is designed to record audio over the computer, or we use just Zoom. And what Mick's advice there on how to use the right device to pick up your audio is, if you get that right, Zoom can work quite well. There's also Zencaster, which I haven't had good luck with on shaky internet, but other people have as well as far as recording goes. And then for editing, you can either get free software. Audacity is one free software, or GarageBand just comes right on a Mac if that's what you're using. Or you can pay for like Adobe Audition is another option there. But let's keep going on these stories. I think a lot of people are looking for coverage on a story. What makes a good story versus maybe a not so good? And I know I put Bill on the spot on that earlier. So maybe Trevor, to you, what makes a good story that you're excited that you just can't wait to capture and share?
Well, I think one of the things is that if it's new or different, somebody that maybe people don't know about it, a new technology maybe that's just coming out, or some new technique that somebody's using, maybe that they're having some luck with. I mean, those are always interesting, just that hey, this is really new, that people would find interesting. The other thing is, make sure it impacts, a lot of people. Is this going to interest a lot of people? We cover a large area for our show, so sometimes, you think about, will somebody in North Dakota, or in Nebraska be as interested in this as they would in Minnesota or in Canada or whatever? So, stories that have a wide swath or a broad range, are always really interesting, because we cover all those different states. And so we try to kind of make it where, hey, is this a really small area that people going to find this story interesting? Or would somebody in a state, 400 miles away find this story interesting as well? So, I mean, I think you always got to kind of think about those things too. But I think those are probably the two main things that I would say. Is it interesting to a large number of people, or would people find this person? Another thing, maybe it's not a product or a technique, maybe it's a person. And those are very general and broad based. I mean, if somebody is a really interesting character and they've done stuff for their whole career, and then we did a story recently where a guy had been farming for a lot of his life, and then he left farming, or he'd been a racer his whole life, and then he got into farming like in his 70s or whatever. So I mean, people, it doesn't matter where you're living, people would find that story interesting. And so I think people are always very interesting, especially if they have a unique background, a unique story to add. I think that's one too, where, we found out through the history of our show that people love to hear about what other people are doing, or what other farmers are doing, or, interesting story, lifestyle kind of profiles of different people as well. So those are always well received as well also.
And Bill, for you, reaching out for Successful Farming Magazine, we asked you about kind of how people should reach out to you, but what makes a good source? Like, once you're on the phone with somebody and you're interviewing them, what gets you really excited when you're talking to a source, so that all of us can try to be better sources for stories like this, so that we get called back another time?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think Trevor nailed that answer 100%, and great job on that. Couldn't be any more succinct about it. I think for me, what makes a good source is someone who is not necessarily trying to toot their own horn, but again, trying to help farmers, trying to help the ag community do things better, which is a pretty nebulous term, but that's kind of what our objective is. A good source to me is someone I can go to more than once. I can follow up with, who can work with me to make the story the best that it can be. Someone who can be objective, and someone who can once they're done talking about the topic that they're really interested in, that I can go back to and follow up with further questions. Maybe if I have some clarification or something needed. Just someone that's going to be there and be reliable. To me, that's kind of how that relationship gets built. It's like any other friendship. You can go back over and over again and count on them.
Right. And Bill, question for you, and this is a little bit off topic, but I wanted to make sure we asked you, which is, all of us would like to think of ourselves as writers, but there's certainly a broad range in, good writing and not so great writing. As you see stuff that's out there on the internet or wherever, what advice would you have to help people with their writing as they're just trying to convey their own messages?
Yeah, I think it comes back to being real. I think the people who are in this workshop, there should be some resources that are provided, maybe some web links to access that basically kind of boil down my philosophy, which is, be simple. Don't write to an audience that's so technical that the audience can't understand it. We're always taught in journalism school to write to an 8th grade education. So don't use really long words or really big sciencey words. Use basic words, basic language. And right off the bat, it's very important to let the reader know why they're reading this article. So that point, that objective, really has to be in the first paragraph of any news release, story, whatever, to let readers know why they need to continue reading this, because we all know that our time and our attention spans is short. So if we're not getting right if we're not cutting to the chase, people aren't going to read that article.
Mick, I want to follow up on what Bill just said with you. As you're interviewing people on a daily basis, I'm sure there's some people who maybe don't give you enough in their answers, and you're having to constantly ask more and more questions to try to dig, and others that you're like, okay, well, give me my chance to ask a question every once in a while. What is the right balance there in having a natural flow of conversation when you're doing a radio interview?
Same as if you're out on a township road leaning on a fender. Meet somebody in a bar or on a street corner. All of a sudden, hey, there's somebody in the grocery store I haven't seen for a long time. You catch up and you want to talk about topics that are interesting to you. if it wasn't for the weather, how many people would be able to start a conversation is an old slogan, but just to have a conversation with everybody, just a personal one-on-one, and one thing about the radio audience, which is somewhat similar to a television audience, is people are just eavesdropping on your conversation. It's two people having a talk, and it's really interesting, if you're kind of eavesdropping on two other people's conversations. As far as topics, this is a communication workshop, but I would say probably 90% of the people who are here are ag communicators. And there are radio stations that are out west that are reluctant to carry my show because they've said, well, you don't talk about cows enough. And so, although agriculture is a very specific topic, on a story on agronomy or increase or a new nitrogen fixing fertilizer that it makes its own nitrogen from the air. That's pretty cool. Not very interesting to a hog producer or a turkey producer, but certainly to a farmer. So, but when it comes right down to it, you have to narrow cast. Think of your audience as different segments, and then speak directly to them about a topic that is very specific to them. And going back to what Trevor and Bill said, is if it makes you money, then it's interesting. And if it comes down to cash, everybody's interested in making money.
Excellent. All right, Trevor. So let's say we've successfully got ourselves, in the media, and we've had a great time capturing that content. It's all over. What should we do next, or is it over and go on to the next one?
Yeah, I mean, for TV, if you've done a good job with your interview, and I'll get back to a little bit what Mick was saying too. Obviously, if you contacted a media and want to do an interview, and especially if it's for radio or TV, just be prepared or be expecting that, hey, we're not interested in a 5-second answer or 7-second answer. I mean, we're also not interested in Mick maybe more at radio. Obviously you have a longer time to fill, but like Mick said earlier, with sometimes TV, all we're looking for is a good, succinct 10 to 20-second soundbite. So kind of think of it from a TV standpoint as that's what we're kind of looking for. And so sometimes the reporters will keep asking questions. We kind of know, our ears kind of perk up when we know, hey, that was a good soundbite right there. That was one that we were looking for, whatever. But don't be so shy maybe, or that you make sure that you say what you need to say and then be done with it. Like has been said here, be succinct, to the point, and clear, but don't feel like you have to kind of keep going on and on. Now, we'll ask you more questions. The reporters will ask you more questions if they have more questions or follow-ups or don't understand it. I always feel like, as a reporter, kind of, what would I ask? What would I ask? I came into this egg business not knowing really much of anything about egg. I kind of I had a TV sports background, so all of it has been interesting to me. So when I ask people questions, or when I go out to stories, I'm asking questions from a standpoint of, and I think, Bill said it, you approach it as maybe an 8th grade education, as, hey, what would I want to know about this? Why is this important? Or why should I know about this? Tell me more about this, And so I think if you, as a reporter, can think about it that way, it'll help the interviewee to say, okay, I need to explain this, whatever, and just do it in a succinct way, but don't feel like you have to talk for a minute or 2 or 3, especially for TV. Make your succinct point 10 to 20 seconds, and then let the reporter follow up with other questions as well. But getting back to your original point, Tim, I mean, once you kind of said your thing for TV and done your interviews, there's not maybe a whole lot else that you do. We'll kind of take it from there, and kind of, we take it back to our office, and we'll pick out, hey, okay, we had a 5-minute interview there, a 10-minute interview. What's the best soundbite, or what's the best couple of soundbites that we can use to incorporate in our show? Sometimes for TV, we'll interview people for 30 minutes or an hour sometimes, and we'll put a longer story, a package together of 2 or 3 minutes, and then you pick out 3 or 4 of the best, most interesting ones and kind of mold them into a longer TV form type story as well. But once you've done your story, once you've done your interview for TV, you're pretty good, and then it's kind of in the reporter's hands to kind of turn that around and make it a good TV product.
Yeah, Trevor, I want to hone in on something you just said where you talked about don't feel like you need to go on for 1 or 2 minutes. You know, for somebody on your side of the camera or your side of the mic, if they do go on, 10 minutes plus, and you're like, okay, I cannot use any of this for TV because my segment's so short. Do you cut them off? Do you let them keep going? You try to redirect the conversation? Are there any tactics or strategies for, cutting off the rambling?
Well, I think, yeah, if you see after your first question or something that, you ask one question and that person can go on for 5 or 10 minutes, then I think you're a little more, you may be, as you see they're kind of rambling or whatever, you may interrupt them or cut them off or say, well, I'm really trying to get at this point, or can you elaborate more on this? And you kind of try to frame it in that way where you can let them know exactly that, hey, here's the specific thing we're looking for. So I don't think you can't be afraid to do that if somebody is doing that. I would say that's probably happens less, Tim, than the other way where maybe people are, short and it's like, oh, okay, 5-6 seconds and I'm good. That's sometimes more of a challenge is, getting people to, can you elaborate on that? Can you tell me more about this? And some people are just really short-winded. I've talked from everything from, farmers to high school athletes and different things. And sometimes it is hard pulling, trying to get, I've done many interviews where getting a 5-second coherent soundbite from somebody that's interesting is difficult. So there's challenges on both sides, but again, just, from a TV standpoint, kind of know what you're looking for. It's different things as you prepare for these, as people prepare for these, know what radio is kind of expecting, where, as Mick said, that's more of a conversation and it can go on a little longer. From TV, here's what we're looking for. You're looking for a few 10 to 20 second sound bites. And then from print, it can kind of be a little different as well. So it's always good to know what they're kind of looking for, what your media is kind of looking for as you go into the interview. So you have a better idea of, do I need to be a little bit long-winded? Should I be a little more short and concise in that way?
Great. Well, thank you, Trevor. As we start to wrap up here ahead of lunch, I want to give each of the three of you, more of an open-ended question so that you can kind of add in anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about here on the panel. So, Bill, we'll start with you. Just in general, to an audience of people who are doing great work and want more people to know about it, is there anything we haven't got to or anything you'd like to emphasize that we did touch on that you would provide them in terms of getting the word out there more?
Yeah, I think just establishing a rapport. Let's say your county extension or state extension or someone like that, or NRCS. I think it's establishing a rapport with your state magazine editors, your national magazine editors at workshops where you might see someone in the hallway, provided we ever get to that insight presentation again. Go up and introduce yourself and hand a business card and say, hey, I'd love to, I've got some ideas. I'd love to talk sometime, and then follow up with them. I think that's probably the most important thing. At these events, a lot of times, people are handing out business cards right and left, and it's kind of hard to remember who's who. So make sure to follow up, whether it's email or phone call. I'm still an old-fashioned phone call type of guy. Say, hey, we met, just kind of want to follow up with you. But it's, kind of don't badger, but be respectful and just kind of keep that dialogue open.
What a great communication tip just there in general. I mean, following up, and absolutely, it's a way to differentiate yourself because so few people actually do. So thank you, Bill, for that. Mick, let's get some kind of closing comments from you. Just, general advice to people who are doing great work and want to get the word out.
Email is a great way to make the contact, because then, if you call somebody, leave a voice message. Sometimes I don't check my voicemail but everybody always checks their email, even when they're participating in a webinar such as this, a workshop such as this. People on Zoom are checking their email to either stay awake so email is a great way to make a contact and have a little content in there to pique the interest of a person who may want to interview you. And I guess that's about it. Maintain the communication. Again, I'll be calling people, I make sometimes 30 or 40 phone calls a day to find 7 or 8 people to interview. And most people are willing, if they're able to be on the radio, if they don't have a commitment. So I really appreciate that. Phone calls are good. Emails are I think the best, because people can check that, or a text. Texting is also, I think, highly underutilized. If you know somebody's cell number, send them a text. They're answering texts just maybe more quickly than anything else these days. So technology is changing. Being on the radio, being on the television, getting some inches of print is different than it was 30 years ago. And in the next 10 to 15 years will probably change a lot more than it has in the last 10 to 15 years. So utilize the latest technology to maintain those relationships.
I think you brought up something that we haven't touched on yet, which is when you're reaching out to people, Mick, it sounds like you're reaching out for the radio that day. So responsiveness is probably pretty key, because you're on a deadline every day. Is that right?
Absolutely. I'll be on the radio here in 1 hour, and I don't have my 1:15 guest yet. And I got to check my email or text to see if this banker in Southern Minnesota wants to be on the radio today, or if he can be. So yeah, timeliness is good. In Bill's case, I go to trade shows and conferences and conventions, and yeah, the print people are able to, sit down for a half hour and talk to somebody and take copious notes, and then next week write a story. Well, I've got a 2-hour, I talk to people all morning because I've got a 2-hour show to do in the afternoon. So yeah, timeliness is very important.
Absolutely. All right, Trevor, I'm going to give you the last word here. Anything else we didn't touch on, or something that you want to put a fine point on before we wrap things up and then make some announcements ahead of lunch?
Well, I would just kind of echo what Mick said. I mean, I think email is a great way to get in touch with people. And the big thing is, I think I would say, is don't be afraid to reach out. What's the worst thing that can happen is that you don't hear back. Don't be afraid to reach out, even if you don't get a response the first time. Maybe, try it again. There's so many different ways, as we've said: social media, Twitter, email, phone call. And for like an organization like ours, AgWeek, if you have a reporter maybe that is in your area or something that you feel more comfortable with, we have more than one person you could reach out for. So there's always ways to reach out to that reporter, or some of our head people as well, or myself. I mean, there's always ways to do that, but don't be afraid to reach out and to get a story. Maybe you're onto something. Maybe the thing that you pitched is maybe we get a different idea from that, or maybe it's kind of a little bit of a spin-off of something else. I mean, you can't be afraid to reach out and do that. I think that's the best way. And then once you get to the interviews, you know your subject better than anybody. I mean, you know some of these things. So just be yourself. Just be yourself. Tell us what you know. Tell us in a easy to understand, format, not talking above people's heads, like Bill said, a scientific-y way or whatever, but be yourself, be comfortable, be relaxed, just like you're having a conversation. It's been said many times here, but just be yourself, and it'll come off well, whatever interview you do in whatever format, whether it's TV, radio, or print.
Oh, man, this has been great. Mick, Trevor, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing the expertise. It was really, really good. And I know I am going to start putting together some press releases every once in a while. I never do that.
I know. I don't use press releases often, but when I do, I get a really good response. And I need to remember that that's a great tool to get information out.
Absolutely.